Episode 12, Aardig and Jem, Part 1. Mokka leaned in again, up to his ear this time, as the last firework made its lonely path through the sky and erupted in a shower of red and white diamonds. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you so very much. Goodbye, Jem heavily. The world seemed to swirl uncontrollably around Pierre. One moment he sat on the park bench, watching fireworks with Mokka, kissing. The next it was all black. Goodbye. Pierre panicked. He felt his blood quicken. Tried desperately to look around himself. Was the room pitch black? His eyes blindfolded? Was he asleep? Before he knew it, his eyes shot back open, and the world re-enveloped him. His mouth moved by itself. Behind you! Aardig! There she stood, a ways in front of him, dressed in her finest plate armour, her signature red cloak and emerald green battle kilt, and her blade drawn in a fierce clash with a far less opulent foe. She quickly took heed of Jem's warning, raising one heavy-clad boot and kicking out hard against the enemy soldier's stomach, the small man being sent sprawling onto the floor with a pained grunt. Before she had even finished the kick, Aardig's crimson eyes glowed an even deeper red than usual, with a seamless pirouette on her heel of equal menace and elegance to face the threat that Jem had warned of. Charging at her was a middle-aged, ferreted man, dressed in civilian researcher's clothing, and clumsily charging forward with what appeared to be a soldier's short sword. From the way he was running, the sword was most certainly not the man's, but that was no reason to underestimate someone. Just meters away from the semi-dull blade colliding with Aardig, the man suddenly stopped and collapsed to his knees. Aardig's own sword now found its way to his neck. The reason for his stopping? Aardig had simply used her power to remove the sword from her attacker's hand. One moment the civilian had been desperately charging with all his might and resolve, and the next he had looked down to see his sword had literally flown out of his hand and hit the floor with a harmless clatter. Happy that the untrained man wouldn't try stab her in the back a second time, Aardig turned back to the other man she'd kicked a moment ago, and stared as though into his soul. The lightly armoured, ragged soldier had picked back up his own sword and stood with a decent stance, but Jem, who by now had made his way over to the trembling civilian, who was staring longingly at his empty hands, simply hoped the enemy soldier would do the sensible thing and lay down his weapon. As long as he did, Aardig would happily leave the man live. After all, had she wanted to, she could have killed both men in mere seconds, simply turning their own swords against them telekinetically. Have them fly out of their hands and into their throats or hearts or lungs or eye sockets, or... She still tries to avoid giving people painful deaths. The soldier continued to look between his tightly gripped blade and Aardig. The air was tense and time seemed to move slower as the man made his choice. To die what he perceived as doing his duty, or to live as a disgraced warrior. Jem was almost about to open his mouth and try to talk down the enemy. All around them were corpses, dozens of them, and more outside this building, enough for one day. But before he could, the soldier made his choice. He charged, yelling with everything his tired lungs had left to give. Aardig stepped to the side expertly and effortlessly brought down her blade. The enemy's head rolled off cleanly, his body following quickly after. Decapitation. A method of death that hurts the executioner more than the victim. Except if it fails, of course. Nothing worse than a guillotine that stops halfway. But Aardig never fails. An instant death. Nice call, Aardig said in her usual flat tone. Jem smirked mirthlessly, in the middle of binding the civilian man's hands. Not that there was much need. Watching the last friendly soldier in the room get decapitated had been more than enough to break the small man. Ha! Like you needed it. A man that weak hardly posed a threat, and I doubt this here jester would have even scratched your armour. Aardig's lip curved downwards. Jem, he might have had dependents. You should not be so callous. Dependents? Not family or loved ones, but dependents, Jem thought to himself. He had hoped getting back to the battlefield might break Aardig out of her shell a little. The plan had gone perfectly. Any plan of Aardig's always did. A squad of 10, himself as leader, the golem as his second, and Aardig as empress, simply observing her forces in the field. At least that's what they told all the marshals, who insisted it was insanity for her to enter the battlefield, even if she had already racked up the most kills. Along with 7 others of Jem's personal choosing, they had snuck their way past the Alliance army and into the sacred city of the Ancients. They'd taken out more than half the local forces before the alarm was even raised. 10 against 100 is not such bad odds when you have the element of surprise and a knife in the dark. Maybe not the most honourable way, but if they should succeed today, they would save a lot more blood in the long run. And yet, rather than being pleased at their victory, Jem felt uneasy. More and more lately he felt it. It was many years since he had been that hapless boy at the Battle of 10,000, Since that day when he'd been unable to even stand by her side as she slew the entire enemy. No, now he knew he could at least guard her. He knew he was the best swordsman on the continent. Only Aardig herself could best him with a blade. And yet the more years went by, the more that felt irrelevant. Here was his oldest friend, speaking to an almost blank face, with the words of a machine rather than a person. What the hell is happening to you, Aardig, and how do I help you? Before he could apologise for his comment on the dead soldier, one of the others from the party came charging in. Youngest of the group, the boy had been automatically picked as squad gopher, the one tasked with running messages despite a heavy set of armour on his back, underneath a camouflage cloak. Havle, my lady, he said, immediately going down on one knee to bow. Jem saluted back. What is it, lad? Speak freely. Yes, sir. The Lord Golem, sir. He said the main Alliance army has started to move in our direction. 30 minutes before the main force is on top of us, sir. Even less for the scouts. Jem cussed under his breath. A Golem's eyes are never wrong. Before looking over to Aardig, she nodded before speaking. Teams of 2. Check each building quickly. We have this one. The younger man glanced up at Jem, as though looking for more elaborate orders. You heard her, didn't you? Pair up in teams of 2, at least one sensitive or magi in each group. One team to each of the smaller temples. Me and the Empress will take this central building. If you find something, do not try and activate it without reporting back to us first. Relay that to the Golem. He'll handle the pairings and coordination. Understood, son? The sacred city of the ancients was living up to its name. For miles around there was the rubble of ancient houses and other buildings, but central of all was the 5 temples, 4 of them surrounding a larger 5th. The 4 were 3 layers of metre-tall stonework in height, each individual block carved with intricate masonry detail and massive sections of inlaid metals and rare gems. But the central temple was the most impressive of all. It dwarfed the already impressive height of the other 4, spanning up into the clouds. Like the others, it was made of large square stone layers, ridging into a pyramidal shape as each layer of square was narrower than the last. Even more gems and metals lined this temple, and large fine-work staircases tracked up each side. Aardig led the way up these stairs to the top level of the pyramid, Jem close behind, dragging his prisoner by bound hands. They entered the top floor with haste, the golem's warning of an incoming army fresh on their minds. The top floor was different to the others, if for no other reason than it was empty. Everyone had obviously left when the alarm, a series of massive bells, was raised, probably all lying dead on the floors below. But aside from that, the room also was empty of objects. The centre was a blinding pillar of white light, presumably let in by a window in the roof for sunlight to be magnified in some manner. Along the walls were terminals of glass or precious rock. Jem wasn't entirely sure. Other than that, there was almost nothing. Even the researchers didn't seem to have left anything behind. That wasn't to say it was normal. There was a warm, hazy feel to the place, possibly because of the sunlight pouring in. Further, there was an odd taste to the air, a faint oxide to it. Feel it too? Aardig asked after a moment. Yup, looks like this place is definitely magical, and probably the source of this weapon. At the mention of weapon, the small man Jem had been dragging about suddenly became lively again, speaking for the first time in the same language as his captors, if more broken. Weapon! No! Weapon! Danger! Dangerous! Jem's eyebrows rose a fraction. So you're finally awake. And yes, dangerous is the general idea of giant cannons that turn armies into smouldering craters. Hey, Princess, you want to check out these panel things while I have a little chat with our friend here? Aardig nodded her approval, and the two set to work. Well, you get all that? Jem asked while gesturing his hand towards the now unconscious and somewhat more bruised prisoner. Summarise, Aardig said back. Jem sighed. All right, from what I could gather, this is the cannon's control room. It takes 2 magi to fire, one standing like a lemon in the column of sunlight, the other having to focus their mind, imagining the place they want to shoot at, I think. And bam, you got yourself a new lake on the map. It doesn't much explain how it works or where it shoots from, but maybe this place is connected to heaven or something. That blast that comes down is from the gods, maybe? Makes as much sense as anything. Jem finished unenthused. Jem, you're not religious. Aardig, in what might have been a taunt, said back. Princess, you really shouldn't say that out loud. You are a saint, remember? She shrugged. Magi amplification. You gonna explain that a bit more? Aardig shrugged again, and Jem sighed. Well, don't matter how it works. Let's get it going, eh? I'll hop into the light and you... A grip like iron took hold of Jem's wrist. He said it was dangerous. Jem grinned. So you were listening. He was trying to stop us from using it on his mates. Anyway, you're the only one with perfect memory, right? You can fire this thing close enough to the Alliance's main army without hitting them. If me or one of the others were to fire it, we would probably end up blowing up some small town by accident. Jem pulled his wrist free and stepped forward again, only for Aardig to lay a hand on his shoulder. Use him, she said, looking at their captured researcher. Jem politely removed her hand. He ain't a magi. You of all people would have sensed it if he was. One of the others? It wasn't a question. Excuse me? Jem said, his voice growing harsher. I can sense one coming. 60 seconds, Aardig proclaimed completely casually. You mean one of my subordinates? Princess, I ain't about to go throw some kid into this thing, you hear? I'm your bodyguard. It's my job to do this stuff. I don't need you to protect me. Aardig's face took on a faint hint of frustration. Irrational. Your value nets higher than your subordinates. Jem's face flushed with anger. How dare you talk about that, about our troops? Some of these guys have been with us on multiple campaigns, across entire continents besides you and me. They're not units on a board. Can't you talk like a human for just a second? Aardig cast her gaze down to her feet, not saying a word. Jem rubbed loosely at his scalp. Sorry. Look, we'll be fine, okay? Only you can safely fire this thing. And even if the researchers were afraid of the light, that doesn't make it deadly. Or how would they have put it up with it? I don't know. They'd have had a do not cross this line sign, you know? Jem leaned over and took Aardig's head into his arms, unable to remember the last time they touched one another like this. A gasp from her confirmed she was thinking much the same thing. I haven't been a very good friend, have I? When we get back, my dear Sola, let's talk properly when we get back, eh? Once we have this cannon, we're done, right? No one else in the world can oppose your empire. Not this magic of the ancients. Even it didn't stop us. So let's talk properly about things when this is done, alright? And I'm sorry for leaving you alone for so long. Right now, let me do this much for you. At least this much. And like that, he pulled away and jumped into the pillar of light before Aardig could grab him for a third time. He could have sworn he saw her mouth the words, "But you're already the one who's always here for me. Before the blinding light obscured his vision. Jem, or no, is it Pierre? Floated in a seemingly borderless white void. What was I doing? Right, Aardig, helping Aardig, wasn't I? The void, the white pillar, the ancient's cannon. I stepped in and then it all went to fireworks. Mocker or Aardig. Wait, are they the same? No, they're different, I'm sure of that, right? Red eyes. Where am I? Aardig? That isn't even her name, is it? Not really. Maka Umit. What does that name mean to me now? A car horn sounded loudly, and finally reality flooded back to Pierre. The horn was so familiar, an old Ford van. Right. I stepped in, and next thing I knew I was in the middle of London. In a street, being yelled at by the driver of a van. But that was 30 years ago, and that memory, how could I have forgotten it? Or had I forgotten it? Pierre rubbed his forehead, trying to get his bearings. The park bench he was splayed out on. Around him there was just streetlights, and in the distance the sound of car horns, the very thing that had awoken him. I fell asleep? Damn, I really am getting old, napping on a date. He grumbled, standing up and stretching his arms awkwardly. Maka, you around? She hardly left for home without me. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you very much. Goodbye, Jem Hafley. The words rang through his head. Maka! He was running now. He wasn't sure when he had started running, but he had no intention of stopping. Unlike the park, the rest of the town was busy with Valentine's couples on their way to dinner or heading home for the evening. Some even pointed at Pierre, recognizing him from interviews and such like on his books. Through the alleys and past the shops they had frequented every day now for 2 long weeks, 2 fun weeks of banter and quibbling and endless questions. 2 glorious weeks he hadn't known he'd needed so badly in his life. He rounded the final corner into his own street, the long broad place of expensive 3-story townhouses, and there in front of his own house, a squad car with 2 young officers standing by his front door, one talking into his radio receiver, as though asking for some sort of backup. The Fireworks! Damn, they got here fast. Or was I asleep for that long? Pierre didn't dwell on this inconvenience long, edging his way along the house to one of the many tall windows on the fourth floor. One he deliberately left unlocked for if he forgot his keys or if the front door stuck closed. Carefully closing it behind him, he found himself inside the parlour, and there on the coffee table lay a note. A letter, really. Pierre's heart sank. He shakily picked it up, reading it in the dim glow of one of the street lights shining through the window. It was long and written in a somewhat scribbled way, indicative of a rush. Pierre traced his finger along the words, skipping between paragraphs. Sorry to put you to sleep like that, but all going well, you have now remembered our final moments together. You were right about those Aztecs. They didn't just build similar temples to our world's ancients. The two are one and the same. The ancients all disappeared one day, the entire race, to Earth, like you did. I'm sorry it took so long. I used the Empire, the one we built together, found people from all across it to research the temple, to find a way to get you back. But there isn't one, Gem. No Magite on Earth. That's why the Aztecs never returned to Bolya. It's impossible. They got stuck just like you. Eventually we learned that the temple's original purpose, not as a gun or a teleporter, but a looking glass, a way to look out at distant stars and worlds like Earth. In a way, a primitive version of the NTME, but gone wrong. 2 weeks, that's all that can be done now. There isn't enough magic left here. Moving the ancients' entire race, firing the cannon twice, it's all drained it. Using my own magic power, I was able to get a few weeks out of what's left, but after that, the portal may never open again. You must understand, Maka is me and I am her. She is simply a side of me I never got to show you back then. She's the idealized version not from your head, but mine. She's the way I wish I could have looked, the way I wished I could have talked with you. She's just a projection of me that the temple gave life. I must return now. Not only is the Magite losing its last sparks, but further I'm unconscious for as long as I project Maka's image to you. It will not do to leave my empire unattended any longer, even if it's for you. And don't hold this against young Maka. She knew nothing. Like you, she had dreams, hints of real memories, but really believed herself to be a younger me, one from before things got so complicated. Me and her are fully combined now, hence my writing this letter. Do not mourn her. She will always be within me. In fact, she insists that we visit my favourite place, one last time. She'll wait until you enter the house, and then she'll leave when you're not looking. My reasons, Jem, for all this are simple ones, and they're selfish ones. I've spent years, 30 of them, fearing what happened to you, hoping against hope that you were not dead, but also that you lived, that you moved on. My last request of you is therefore that you don't let this be the end. Take what Marcus showed you and live your life, my old friend. Go out there and find someone. My wish, dear Jem, is that if this temple still has any power left, that in 1 year's time I can look in at you on a Valentine's date, that I can know you won't spend the rest of your days alone because of me. I hope you understand. I hope this experience was for the best, and that the good Maka did will outweigh the hurt I know you must be feeling right now. And to prove once and for all this is me, I shall sign with my true name. Dear Jem, please live long and well. All my love, farewell. Sola. Pierre's voice caught as he read the final lines. He wiped tears from his eyes, scrunched up the note, and stormed over to the fireplace. "You damn idiot!" he roared as he slammed his fist against the mantel. As the heavy impact landed, a faint clicking sound, and the wall of the fireplace slid back slowly. Pierre reached up into his hidden compartment, retrieving 2 old and tarnished steel soldier pieces, a worn leather breastplate, and a scabbarded sword. "You're not going anywhere that easy," he muttered as he put on the gear for the first time in many decades. And with that he charged over to the front door, swung it open with the determination to bring Aardig, Sola, Mocker, or whatever damn name she's going by, back this very instant. The door opened. At the bottom of the steps, the now 8 police officers, 4 of which looked suspiciously like armed police, stared up at Pierre. Pierre closed the door. "Ah, right. Bollocks!" Episode 12, Part 2, Aardig and Jem. The sound of clattering bashed against Pierre's front door, accompanied by an agitated voice. "Mr. Havelock! Mr. Havelock! We know you're in there! We saw you open the door! Mr. Havelock, we just want a quick chat, sir!" Pierre cussed to himself. 8 of them! Maybe they think I've been held hostage or something. 8 officers for some stupid fireworks! I don't have time for this. Pierre weighed up his options. It didn't take long. There would be no chance of sneaking back out through the window now that the police knew he was inside. He glanced down at his hip, at the dull brown-wrapped colour of his sword. He had never thought to wield it again for as long as he lived. He studied his breathing in a method of concentration learnt a literal lifetime ago. He stood to one side of the front door, enough that it could swing open without hitting him, his hands on the lock switch. Outside, he knew 2 of the armed response officers were making their way up the steps. They weren't actually carrying live ammo, which came as a relief, but still they wore stab-proof vests and heavy-set helmets. In their hands was what the police lovingly called the big red key, an object with the appearance of a fire hydrant, used for knocking down doors. He waited silently in the lightless porch of his house, listening for the sounds of heavy boots on steps and the grunts of the man holding the key, the faint thud as the second man braced himself against the door. 2, 1, hurr! At the exact moment they swung, the exact second the 2 police officers put all their force into busting down the door, Pierre let it open. The 2 men, carried by their weight, momentum and surprise, were sent flying into the house's hallway, the big red key leaving a visible dent on the floorboards where it landed. Before the 2 men could recover from their sudden fall, Pierre shot out and pulled the door closed behind him, with a clicking of a faulty lock falling into place. "The blasted thing always locks itself. I have to leave a window open to get back in when it shuts me out. About time I used that to my own advantage. 2 down." Slowly, Pierre turned round to face the 6 remaining and highly bemused men and women of the law standing before him. 4 were the regular kind in high-vis jackets with the words police helpfully plastered everywhere. The other 2 dressed in the riot clothing of the armed response crew. "Sir, are you all right? How about you unlock that door for our colleagues and we can all have a nice chat over some lovely tea, maybe?" said one of the plain-clothes officers. Jem grinned, laid a hand to the familiar-feeling grip of his sword hilt, and drew forth his blade. "Sorry, lads, but I've got somewhere to be." Pierre launched forward like a tiger. The officer nearest flailed backwards in response, taking out a baton to defend himself. Pierre simply ducked underneath it, flipping his sword into a backwards grip and rammed the butt of the weapon into the unfortunate man's stomach. This first officer tumbled backwards, coughing up spittle and falling to his knees. "Next!" The second officer drew out a yellow silhouette of a taser gun, while a third edged nearer with a baton of her own, and a much better stance than her fallen workmate. "Last warning, sir. We're just trying to do our jobs. Lay down the weapon." Pierre laughed. "Everyone's just trying to do their jobs, woman. Soldiers on both sides of a war. On a battlefield are just trying to do their jobs, are they not?" "A battlefield? Is that what this is, sir? You were in the war. We can help you with that if that's what it is. PTSD is very understandable." "Pah! How old do I look to you? I'm not even 60 yet, thank you very much. And you know what? I've never felt more alive." Pierre roared with manacle as he lunged forward. Officer 2 fired his taser, while 3 readied her baton. Jem was faster. While the officers all kept their eyes focused on his sword, his free hand grabbed number 3 by the forearm and dragged her close. The taser hit. 3's baton clattered against the tarmac beneath. Before Officer 2 could realise his mistake, Pierre tackled the now unconscious woman forward into her friend, pinning the smaller man underneath his own colleague. 4 and 5, 3 to go, boys!" Pierre howled like a wolf in his prime, turning his attention to the 2 riot police. They stood completely starstruck, but ready nonetheless. In each of their hands was a baton gun, a non-lethal weapon used to shoot massive rubber bullets at an attacker. They now raised those weapons. Pierre charged forwards towards them, paced the cordon of police cars, bathed in the glow of the streetlights. The 2 fired, massive rounds whistling through the air. Jem leaped, twirled through the air like a man 4 decades younger. His ancient sword glittered a brilliant arc through the sky, reflecting the light of the moon above as it cut through both projectiles in a single flourish only a swordmaster could have even hoped to pull off. He landed back on his feet right before the 2 riot officers, the halved rubber bullets raining down harmlessly around them. The men reached down to catch Pierre by the shirt collar, but was too slow. Pierre grabbed from the officer's belt his own bottle of mace, spraying an unhealthy amount into their eyes. They flailed back in pain. "Don't rub your eyes! Remember basic training, Craig! Don't rub your eyes!" The The other officer yelled across to her friend. Pierre moved towards this second one, mace in hand, sword in the other. The woman threw down her helmet's visor and grabbed her own bottle of mace, tossing aside her emptied baton gun. "Let's see how you like this, you crazy old man," she said, partially shouting over the sound of her own friend riding painfully behind them. Her eyes focused on the bottle in Pierre's hand. She almost didn't see him pace forward with a thrust of his sword towards her face. Desperately, she reeled back away, but Pierre's strike hit true. His blade cracked the visor's tip, flipping it upwards and allowing him to spray the second officer in the face with even more mace. The two riot officers, now incapacitated as they searched around for something to clean their eyes with, Pierre turned back towards the steps of the house. The tasered officer was still on the floor unconscious. The one he had winded and the one he'd shot with his own friend, and the one who'd shot his own friend with said taser, had both retreated into one of the squad cars, doors firmly locked and screaming into a radio for backup. The faint sounds of thuds coming from inside of the house indicated the two trapped officers would break back out soon. But for now, all that remained in his path was one brave hanger-on, a regular cop, baton in one hand, taser in the other. Number 8. Pierre covered the distance with a simple walk, passing by police cars, mazed riot cops and tasered officers in his wake. He let the nearly empty bottle fall out of his hand and clatter noisily on the floor beneath, eyes locked on the final man. Now stay back! I will fire, sir!" the boy squeaked. Pierre glanced down at his sword as he spoke. "Do you know, lad, what this magic blade does?" "Please, sir, I'm telling you to stay back." "It amplifies." "Please, I have a wife. She's expecting children." "My power too." "Stay back!" "Predict the weather!" The officer stared blankly at Pierre. "You what?" Pierre's fist collided mightily with the man's jaw, sending him spiralling into a stationary car bonnet. "Sorry, fellas," Pierre said, shaking his fist from the impact. "But I told you I have someplace to be. You'll sleep it off by morning, probably." And with that, the rugged, rogue old man began to sprint down the roadway towards his final destination. "You said once that some people like being alone. Do you want me to leave you?" "Of course not, you idiot! Never!" Pierre yelled aloud to no one in particular. He was running now, faster than he ever had in his life, down short back alleyways, past confused passers-by, weaving in and out of periodic traffic. "Do you think she was ugly? Too much of a tomboy?" "Ha! Never even crossed my mind!" More of Mocker's words seemed to file through his mind now. His chest was heaving in the distance. He could have sworn he heard the sound of sirens. It wouldn't take the police long to catch up. "Every strike and block you make is infinitely better than a signature in mere pen and ink could ever be, even with 3 decades of rust on you." He vaulted over an upturned dustbin before nearly stumbling his way around the next corner, swung his sword with fervour to cut a padlock free of a gate blocking a path he knew would shorten his journey. "You are my friend still, no? Or has 30 years shaken our bonds so much that you would abandon me in a world I do not know, dear Jem?" "I'll never abandon you again, damn it!" Sweat seemed to drip from every pore now. His lungs felt like they were ablaze with the strain. "Would you feel so embarrassed to have a so-called waifu like me as companion, at least for a time?" "It would be the honor of my life." Pierre's breath grew even more ragged with each step. He was grabbed by some tug of a pedestrian, telling him to apologize for charging through the busy streets. Pierre snarled at the young man, flashing his sword to scare the youth off before bolting it once more down the last few streets. "Did you ever tell her how you felt?" Pierre rounded the last bend, almost collapsing against the nearest wall for support. He had made it. Everything hurt, every bone in his body complained, every ligament stretched and screamed, but he had made it. And there she stood, the girl with the silky white hair flowing freely, the girl with the infinitely deep, swirling brown eyes. She stood in the same old stupid park. They hadn't even really spent that much time there, and yet Pierre couldn't help but feel a strange affinity for the place. The place they'd had their first real argument, the place they'd watched children play ball, and the sun setting, the place of their first date. Mocker stood a little ways in front of the chip van, the one between the 2 small park benches and the great old beech tree. She stared all around, glancing up at the stars, and twirled. It reminded Pierre of something out of an old classic film noir, her face lit by the street lamps as she took it all in one last time. The city, the moon and stars, the park. He simply stood watching for a few moments, dazzled by how strangely beautiful such a mundane sight could be. And then she stopped, nodding to herself as though resolved and content with her last look at the world of Earth. It took all he had to start moving again, to will his feet to take one step after the other, to make his vocal cords cry out once more. Marker! She turned to face the sound of his voice, her hair fluttering behind her, her eyes glistening with a teary sparkle, altogether too cliché, altogether too real. What are you doing here? Me? What about you, eh? Pierre, please, it has to be this way. Says who? Aardig or Mocker? What? Pierre, the letter. We're one and the same. Didn't you read it? You already knew. I think you always knew. There is no way back for you, Pierre. And I'm sorry. So what? You're just giving up? Who cares about the damn letter? Now, who says that? Pierre or Jem? Pierre shook his head ruefully, still pacing slowly to close the distance between him and Mocker. Those are names, girl. The person is only one man. Then why did you ask me? Intent, woman! Everything has intent. Every action, however small, always means something, even if the meaning is as simple as none at all. Pierre, you're not making any sense. I ask what part of you wishes for this, hey? What part of your personality demands we part like this? Because I don't believe it's either. I don't think the excitable Mocker or the lonely Aardig wishes this. Tell me I'm wrong. Mocker's cheeks dripped now with tears as she shook her own head. It doesn't matter. This is our end, and I'm sorry, Pierre, but goodbye. She turned with a flourish, and in a single awful instant, a wet, white speck appeared, then opened and swarmed and spread and burned its way into reality. In the space before Aardig now stood a tower, white oval of blistering light. Pierre reached with all his remaining muster and grabbed her hand. I won't leave you to your fate a second time, you hear me? The tears poured from her pained face. There is no other way, Pierre. Don't make this so sad. Today's a happy day. It's the day you leave your old life behind and move on. And what about you? Silence. Tell me, Pierre, if this was one of your stories... This isn't one of my damn books. But what if it was? How would it end, Pierre? A tale of a beautiful woman appearing before a lonely man locked away in his house. How would that story end? Mocker, tell me. Pierre's grip on her hand loosened a fraction. I suppose the girl would show the man a better way to live. Remind him of the world's wonders. Show him life is worth living again. And then? Well? And then the girl would probably turn out to have been a ghost or a dream or maybe a spirit of some former lover. They would disappear, leaving the man heartbroken for a time but able to live. But Mocker, she freed herself from his grip and took another step forward. Pierre followed suit, grabbing her firmly but carefully by the shoulders. I told you, didn't I? This isn't some stupid book. For sun's sake, Pierre, there is no other way. This planet has no magic, but that's what's in your head. No way to get you home, just what you can remember. And what if I just step straight through that portal, right now? Mocker's face took on a mix of anger and shock. You'd never be so stupid. Chances are you might just step through and nothing would happen. But equally, what if you get sent somewhere random, teleported into deep space to suffocate and freeze alone? But you're wrong. There is Magite on this planet, see? He gestured down to their respective swords. Mocker leaned in close and gently caressed Pierre's face with her soft hands. That sword is as much a projection as I am. It isn't real. Pierre half chuckled, laying a hand reflexively on his own blade's hilt. Clearly his wearing a sword was unnoticeably natural in Mocker's eyes. My sword's silly, not yours. Bestowed upon me the day your father ordained me a knight of the realm. An honest-to-goodness God-new sword. Mocker's face grew ever more pained. She leaned until her forehead matched intermittently with his. It is a sliver of metal, nothing more. Your letter said for every sword you gain a second or two more here. Why could mine not act as an anchor? For me to step through that gate, back to our world. Yeah, that isn't science. It's desperation. I must go, and you must stay. That is all there is. Says who? How is that fair? Mocker pulled back. Fair? When has our life ever been fair, Pierre? We must simply make the best of what we can. But haven't we earned it? Isn't 30 years of being alone enough? Haven't we goddamn earned one happy ending for once in our blasted lives? Mocker smiled through the tears staining her face, her body backlit by the glow of the portal behind. She smiled as broadly as one can imagine, while Pierre spoke his final words. I love you, Aardig. I have always loved you. And I will always, always love you. Aardig stepped forward into the light, and Jem Havler followed one short step behind her. Epilogue. Three Tales Converge. Final chapter.
I just don't understand it, Lone. Nothing about this case makes any damn sense. Rich, successful man suddenly turns his house into a fireworks platform, attacks a half-dozen police officers, and then disappears into thin air,
exclaimed an older, balding man in a heavy-set trench coat. Beside him stood a second, similarly aged individual, wearing a scruffy anorak and rounded glasses.
Not to mention the complete lack of history for man, he said in a thick northern accent. No matter how hard we dig, we can't find anything. No family, no birthplace, nothing.
The two stood in front of an old London townhouse, one now surrounded with yellow police tape and squad cards.
And what are his motives? I hear all we have, a midlife crisis, and you especially, no offence, Lane. None taken, Chief. But no, the man showed no signs of that sort. Rumours say he'd even got himself a new partner. There's just no sense to this case. Hey up, here comes trouble,
said Lane, gesturing his head behind them. Approaching them was a tanned woman with long-shouldered black hair, dressed in a pristine suit dress, a lanyard around her neck identifying her as Dr. Fern Sheikah. "Gentlemen, what progress?" she asked with a tone of authority. The two men simply shrugged. A scowl came across the good doctor's face. "Chief Inspector Halford, you cannot honestly expect me to believe there has been no movement anywhere in almost 24 hours. Halford sighed.
CCTV, AMPR, word of mouth. None of it gives us anything. There's no clues in the house either. I've posted alert to all the nearby airports and... The nearby? Make it nationwide, man.
With respect, ma'am, he isn't a high-value target, surely, the northern detective said back. Sheikah's brows furrowed agitatedly.
Inspectors, Pierre Havelock is the highest value target you have ever dealt with in all your lives. He had unrestricted access to almost all data concerning the undercurrent incident. The things in the book are public knowledge, but schematics for the weapons used or the spacecraft seen, those could shift the balance of power in our world, turn Britain back into a superpower.
The old man's face alighted at this news.
So do you think that's his motive? Take that information and sell it to a foreign power? CIA or the Russians and the Chinese, perhaps?
But Sheikah shook her head doubtfully.
Possibly, but no. He has government contracts to document, to arbiter the project for the next 10 years. He would have made more money than he could ever desire. This discovery, the things he could have wrote on, the way they will change all our lives very shortly, gentlemen. Will, his legacy would have been forever. He could have lived in literary history for millennia to come, longer than I and my team will for making the discovery, as long as Shakespeare or Dostoevsky even. Why, he would throw such an incredible legacy away?
A better offer? Shrugged the chief inspector. A woman? Grinned Lane, causing Halford to smirk. Dr. Fern Sheikah simply shook her head with disdain. Within the land of Valia, the central planet of the so-called undercurrent solar system, there are a great menagerie of legends and folk tales. Among them, two from around the same time are of some interest to this humble archiver. One is the story known by a great many, the story of Empress Aardig, the greatest ruler of all time, seen by some as a living saint and others as an embodiment of God, and agreed by all to have been the most powerful being to have ever walked the planet's surface. Her empire is said to have lasted 1,000 years, the day of her victory proclaimed by many to be the day the first era turned into the second. Even now, the states' union that rules over the Third Age, millennia later, is still situated on the central continent, still has its home where Aardig's throne room once was. But the end of her tale is most peculiar. By all accounts, near the 30th anniversary of her final victory over the continent, Aardig simply vanished. She left no heirs, nor was there any funeral. She, and supposedly even her golem, simply disappeared. Of course, the politicians spun it well, claimed she had been requested of by the gods, that she would never grow old and die, had ascended to the heavens up above. But in truth she was never seen again, turned into the legend of the god Empress, to be worshipped for all eternity. Conversely, in the land of Avernia, there are thousands of myths about. Foremost of all is surely the legend of Isla and the two great giants. But I would draw attention to a different story, a much lesser known one in fact. A tale called The Oracle and the Lady. It comes from a small village in the mountain ranges to the south,
where it is said the families of some of Aardig's loyalist followers retired to after they were finished serving her and carving out the empire. The legend goes that one day a man and a woman arrived at the settlement nestled in the hills. They were quiet folk who kept to themselves at first, building a small home of their own on the edge of the settlement. But in time, they came to be relied upon by all the villagers. They would tell stories together to the children and adults alike, and when wolves or bandits came baying in the night, it is said the lady would turn them away with ease, while the man became known as a renowned sibyl, predicting the weather with deft accuracy, and even saving many lives by foreseeing landslides and rockfalls, often weeks in advance. It is unclear if the two were married or ever had children, but what is known is that they lived out the rest of their days in quiet contemplation there, said to walk the highlands almost every day, always covered in kind smiles for one another as they laughed warmly, beloved and revered by all who saw them. Of course, it is not for this lowly orator to comment on these two tales, on the fact that Aardig's disappearance so closely aligns in date with the arrival of this lady and her oracle. However, as my predecessor used to say, there are no coincidences in stories, just happy beginnings. The end. Thank you for listening. Momentie.